Hello guys, welcome back to the channel, or if this is your first time finding this channel, welcome aboard. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 things after living in the Philippines and returning to my home country that I don't like about living here. So I usually try to keep the channel very positive, but I was recently back in my home country of the United States after living in the Philippines for more than a year, and I started thinking about a few things that I don't like about living in the Philippines. Really, it applies to most of Asia in general. And also, once I got back to the Philippines, to my home base here, those things really set in. I've been back for about a week now, and I thought I'd just put it out there. So even though these things are very personal to me, maybe if you're thinking about coming, or maybe if you're already here, it can just enlighten you about what somebody else who's going through this experience is actually thinking and feeling. So the very first thing that I don't like living in the Philippines because of my personal life is the time zone differences. So I am an attorney, I'm licensed in the United States, and so a large majority of my business is dealing with the United States. Now, the time zones with Eastern Standard Time, which is about where 70% of my business is in the United States, at any given point in the year, depending on daylight savings time, will be either a 12-hour difference or a 13-hour difference. And so it means that if I'm going to be dealing, not necessarily with clients, but with other attorneys that I have to deal with back in the United States, that they're going to have business hours generally between 8 o'clock and 5 o'clock from the morning till the afternoon, and they're 12 to 13 hours behind me, which means I either have to stay up really late at night or I have to get up at like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning in order to have those meetings with those attorneys. And so it really messes with your sleep schedule, especially messes with it when you come off a long haul travel like I just did. And it's taken me over a week to get adjusted to that. Now, in my particular situation, dealing with clients actually as a professional has been not so bad because of the time zones. Believe it or not, a lot of my professional clients, the entrepreneurs and business people that I deal with, when I'm talking to them, they are more than willing to have a U.S. attorney who's willing to do after business hours meetings and consultations with them, because they can get their work done during the day, they can make their money, and then they can get their advice in the evening. So that works out pretty well. But if you are coming from North America, Canada, the United States, really anywhere in that hemisphere, and you're coming to Asia because of the time differences, it's something to keep in mind if you're going to have to be talking with people live, either on the telephone or through Zoom communications or otherwise. The second drawback to living in the Philippines, and this really hit home when I was back in the United States, is the cost of electronics, such as camera equipment, lenses, computers, anything along those lines. Because the tariffs and the markups coming into the Philippines, it really makes it so much more expensive to buy something that I could get in the United States for $300, $400, sometimes $500, $600 cheaper than I would in the Philippines, depending on what that piece of equipment is. Now, there are some options living in the Philippines to where I can go to a nearby country. So for instance, sometimes I can go to Thailand, and I might find something that's going to be less expensive in Bangkok. When I was there recently, I did notice, and I don't know if it's because of the conversion rate currently with the US dollar, but a lot of the electronics seem to be much better priced, not comparable to the United States, but close. And then obviously nearby in Singapore is a place to where you can go and get cheaper electronics. But the one thing about living in the United States was that I was able to get electronics at a much lower rate. Now, this is not unique to the Philippines. I had this exact same experience when I was over in Eastern Europe, specifically in Serbia, and my God, in Albania, it was probably even worse than anywhere that I've been. But it is one of the drawbacks. The third thing that I don't like about living in the Philippines is the sun. It's actually one of the things I love about the Philippines, and it's one of the things that I dislike about the Philippines. So one of the reasons to come to the Philippines is this incredible outdoor nature, beautiful beaches, incredible mountains, just wonderful nature, some of the best places on earth that I've found that you really, really want to be outside all of the time, or as much as possible. It's not a place that I would want to be cooped up inside. Whereas in the United States, for the most part, we really do live indoors. We go outdoors, but we do it getting in a car, going to the mall or something. We're in the air conditioning in the car. We're not just living out in the beating sun. But here in the Philippines, and really wherever I've been in Southeast Asia, is the sun just beats down on you all the time. And me, I'm a white guy and who's as pale as Casper the Ghost. So when I get out in the sun, because of that, in just a few minutes, I will start burning. And if I'm out in it for too long, I end up looking like a lobster. And you've got things you got to think about, such as skin cancer. Not to mention, when you have a burn, you're not going to feel very good, which is why I do take precautions living here, such as wearing bandanas or hats, because my bald head would get red as a lobster's back if I didn't. And to make sure that I try to get sunscreen. Sunscreen's more expensive in the Philippines than it is back at home. But it's one of the things that it's a love-hate relationship as far as the sun goes. I love it because one of the reasons I'm here is, again, I want to be out in that nature, but two, I get burnt pretty quick going out. And so if you do come to the Philippines, if you come to Southeast Asia or another tropical country, just be aware of that sun and that you really do need to take your precautions so that you don't get ate up. The fourth thing that I don't like about living in the Philippines, or realistically, again, this is Asia or most places probably in the world, is that I'm not around my family back in the United States. So I have 3 sisters, I've got nieces and nephews, I've got cousins, aunts and uncles, and my mother and father who live back in the United States. So living in Asia, I don't get to, because it's so far, it's so expensive, there's so many of my immediate family, nuclear family here, it's very expensive to travel back and forth, and it just takes so much time that I really don't get to see them very often. I hadn't seen my mom and dad and the other folks that I visited when I went back to the United States in over 2 years. And going back and being in the home with them, spending a lot of time with my dad, just sitting around talking, it makes me miss, the proximity of being around them. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm married to a Filipina. And so when we were living in the United States, we had the exact opposite problem. Her family was here. So, for instance, our son, we only had the one minor at the time before we got to the Philippines, but he wasn't seeing his grandparents. My wife wasn't seeing her parents and her siblings and her cousins. So it's really a trade-off. She felt the exact same way about the United States and that issue when I was living there. And it's not the Philippines' fault. It's not the United States' fault. It's just when you go abroad, for whatever reason that you do, you are leaving that family behind and not seeing them nearly as often as you would like to. And the final thing that I do not like about living in the Philippines, and this is the one that is going to make everybody angry, probably, the snowflakes will melt, is that when I was back in the United States, I spent a lot of time in the parks and in the woods and talking to some of my friends, and I had forgotten how much that I miss hunting. Now, it wasn't hunting season when I was there. I didn't get to do any hunting with anyone. I did get to play with some guns and my firearms, but I didn't get to actually go out and do any hunting. And I'm not going to get to hunt in the Philippines. Probably very few places in the world that I would actually want to live that I would actually be able to. But that's something that I grew up with. It was part of my life. It was part of my culture. It's a rural thing in many cases because I grew up in a rural area. We had done that. We had done it for food. We had done it for sport, and it was just about getting out in the woods and having that experience. And it's something that, I'll never experience here in the Philippines. Probably nowhere else in Asia that I can think of. Again, that's probably not applicable to anybody but me, and most of these things were very personal just to me. Maybe you've experienced some of those. Leave some comments below about what you don't like if you have lived here or in other countries. Have you experienced these similar things that it's really not the country's fault, it's just that you're leaving things behind, you're leaving people behind, and certain activities that you would do in your home country, you can't do in the new place that you're living. All right, guys, thanks for watching. See you in the next one.